Good evening and welcome to Cavan TV News and Views. My name is Aine Duffy and you're welcome to the very first programme. In this programme we will bring you some international, national and of course local news. If you would like to be a correspondent for your area, you can email us at drumlinmedia@gmail.com or a contact number 086 888 0803. Well, earlier today we talked to Michael Harding in the studio. Michael is an Irish short story writer, novelist and playwright. He was born in County Cavan, but he now lives in Leitrim. He has published 4 novels, Priest, The Trouble with Sarah, Bird in the Snow, and his latest, Staring at Lakes. Michael, you're very welcome to the studio this evening. Hilarious and tender and mad and harrowing and wistful and always beautifully written. A wonderful book. And
That's my new book. It's called Staring at Lakes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going down well.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's selling well.
You went straight in at number 1.
Yeah, in the non-fiction bestseller list in Ireland, it's number 1.
Yeah. And you had a reading in the JCL last night.
That's
and
right.
It was
Yeah.
a mighty evening, wasn't
Well,
it?
it was a great evening.
It was.
Particularly for me, it was personal because there were 2 great writers in Cavan that kind of were mentors for me. One was Dermot Healy, great prose writer, and Tom McIntyre, a great poet and dramatist. And Cavan has a huge amount of talent, you know, in theatre and this, that and the other. But they, for me, were kind of mentors. And to be back there and they were present and loads of people that my family would be connected with, and particularly my mother, who died last summer, and people that were her friends were there. It was a very special night for me, you know.
It was.
Yeah.
Tom McIntyre did a wonderful opening. He read the letter that he wrote to you when you sent him the first script.
Yeah, Tom, you know, he liked the book. He encouraged me. He encouraged me always as a writer when, like, he'd be older than me, but when I was in my early 20s and dreaming about being a writer, he was a great encouragement. So it was lovely to have him there. And I mean, the book is also personal to Cavan because it's the story, it's my story in the sense of, you know, I grew up in Cavan in the town, and I used to cycle out to Killikeen and Lough Oughter as a young teenager, and I'd be there fishing and taking home, you get an old, you know, a Sally branch and you'd stick 7 or 8 pike on it and put it on the back of the bike when you'd be coming home. I wasn't much of a fisherman, but I was a dreamer, you know. I'd stand there just looking out from the shoreline of Lough Oughter at the castle or at Killikeen at the bridge. And I loved where I came from. I loved the lakes. And I travelled really all over the world. I talk in the book about going to India, and I talk about going to Mongolia. I travelled about 2,500 miles through Mongolia in a jeep with a Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
And again, I ended up at a very beautiful lake in Mongolia. And I remember standing on the edge of it and having a peace and serenity, just standing there at the lake in Mongolia and thinking about Lough Oughter and Cavan and feeling that I had come back home, you know.
So you were in the peace of now.
I think in the peace of now, yeah, the power of now. Eckhart Tolle has a great book, The Power of Now. And being in the moment, I think, is the great freedom in life. You know, you use religion all your life to try and find meaning. And you think maybe there's a heaven or maybe there's a hell and all this stuff. Maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God. And I went through that. I was a priest in Cavan at one stage. But I grew out of it, you know what I mean? Like very quickly it didn't work for me. And I studied Buddhist philosophy for about 17 years and practiced, you know, Buddhist practices. Because there's a wonderful place in Cavan, the Jampaling, is a Tibetan Buddhist centre in Bombay. And there's a Tibetan Lama there. And that gives great opportunities to people, you know, to come and meditate and be peaceful and kind of find the presence, you know, to stepping into the present moment and not having anxieties about the past or the future. That's a beautiful space to be in, and that's me. Yeah.
You're right when you're saying, you know, most of us are questioning our being, our life purpose.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's very hard to address that. And in art, I sometimes feel you can do that, like through music, through writing, through painting, through sculpture, through whatever. You've done that. You've done your writing. You've done your spiritual searching. Have you arrived at it now?
No, I've only arrived at the sense of being in the moment. I feel that all the kind of intellectual stuff about, we try and give ourselves an idea of meaning from religion, and I think that in Ireland at the moment we're discovering that we need to let go of a lot of that. Yeah. I think the trauma in Ireland at the moment is to do with the fact that we have let go of a lot of faith experience, but we still want to be faithful. Yeah. We still want to believe. We still want to pray.
Is that like more spiritualism than
well, I think you can do it. I think you can do it in a Catholic church or a Buddhist centre or anywhere you want. Personally, I was in Warsaw recently. I love Poland, and it's a beautiful, beautiful country. But I was in a chapel, a church in the middle of Warsaw, and there was a beautiful icon of the Virgin Mary, and I lit my candle with everybody else, and I said my prayer like everybody else, and I hoped that the mother was watching me. That's very beautiful poetry. To express oneself religiously, devotionally, is a very beautiful poetry. What gets us caught up are the ideas, the intellectual ideas.
Sort of the
that you're in a club and there are rules and all that stuff.
You have to conform.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that the people in Ireland, as well as in most of Western countries, have kind of grown up a little bit from that sort of obedience position where you just sort of don't think for yourself and take all the rules from somebody else. Yeah. And I think people realise now that spirituality is about questioning and about asking yourself questions and sometimes saying, I don't know. My book is also about leaving your wife, getting fed up with marriage after about 15 years and thinking, maybe I should go somewhere else. And men are like that. Men look for younger women. Now, they don't all leave their wives. But secretly, every husband goes through a period where he feels a little bit. Every human being, and I think women do too. I mean, I certainly think women have the same kind of feelings of wanting to explore the rest of the world. And you're looking at your husband and the way he does the shopping, or the way he leaves his nail clippers on the floor of the bathroom, and you say, "Why am I living with this guy?"
Yeah.
But that's human.
Yeah. Apart from that, situations, people change as they develop. They change at different stages of life.
Yeah.
So the spirituality and the meaning of life changes as well, perhaps.
It does, yeah.
And we're still searching all the time.
Yeah, because when you're in your 30s or 20s, 30s maybe, you're looking to the future. You're looking out there into the wide world and seeing, maybe I'll find wonderful adventures in Germany or New York or Chicago or somewhere, and that they will change me and I will become wise and deep. Now, when you're my age, I'm 59, you're not looking out into the future anymore. You're looking into the big black hole in Cully's or some other graveyard. But you are. And I think the kind of realization that it's like that, as a countryman said when my mother died, he said, well, now they're pulling them off our shelf. Do you know what I mean? You're in the queue, your parents die, and then in your 50s and 60s you realise that your time is short too. Now that's a new spiritual journey, and to be able to embrace that in an easy feeling of being in the present moment. And there's one other thing, I think, that the present moment means love. I say in the book, I cannot be human without you. I need you. Now, I need you now. You, this person in front of me. We always need who we're engaged with. And they will make us human if we're just in the present moment with them and accept them.
Last night, Tom McIntyre spoke of the vulnerability he laid bare in the book.
Yeah.
So,
well, not many men like to say, that a man can be emasculated and lose his sense of his pride and his strength and all the rest of it. But when you're sick, sometimes that happens. You become vulnerable because you need other people. And then you realise that you're becoming more human because you're vulnerable.
You say that we need other people, and we do.
Yeah.
We need them to love, to be our strength, our support.
Yeah.
How do you equate that with being a priest and then being in a loving relationship with somebody you love? Is that too much really to expect of a priest to do without that kind of love, or does he supposed to find that love within the church?
No, I mean, like I left. I was a very short time. I ministered for a couple of 2 or 3 years, but I was gone before I was ordained because the Polish Pope had come in. The church had gone conservative, and that's not what I signed up for. So I was gone, and I'm 25 or 30 years out of it. I think that the tragedy is that the clergy, the middle management within the Roman Catholic Church, failed. They really failed badly by lacking vision and being afraid and being conservative. And now it's kind of irrelevant. The idea of enforced celibacy and the idea of it being wrong to use contraceptives, it's ridiculous. Like it really is. And the fact that women don't have a status, they're not allowed in the breaking of bread, in the giving of the sacraments, in the forgiving of sins. Just think about that. That all the key moments that we say are the core sacred moments within the Christian tradition, women are not allowed into those moments. Now that you can say things like, they come up with these silly arguments like, well, we've all different things to do at the church. Some are priests and women who do different things, and we're all equal but different. But that's nonsense. That really is nonsense. The core of the whole Christian tradition in priesthood is about compañeros, the breaking of bread. It's about the sacraments, and the church ruthlessly excludes women, and then goes along and says that, for example, in stuff like abortion, we should make up our minds for women because they can't be trusted, really.
What do you think, the resignation 2 weeks ago of Pope Benedict, if that's a big thing, like it hasn't happened in 800 years?
No.
Are people getting nervous now with the future of the church?
I don't know. I think the remnant that's left within the church are probably much more conservative than when I was there. And I certainly don't want to be negative about somebody's faith, because I too have faith. And I go into the little church here, the convent chapel, when I'm in Dunstores, and I go around the back and go into the chapel, and I will kneel there and I will pray, like I did when I was a child. I used to love Christmas morning, going in there for the very early 8 o'clock morning mass, and the quiet whispers of the nuns behind the grail.
It was soothing, I guess.
It was beautiful, and I loved it, and I still love it. So I really respect and love, and that as a community we pray. But if you ask me about the politics of the men who run the church, I've really lost interest 30 years ago, because they talk intellectual gobbledygook. And Ratzinger, this guy who was the last pope, excluded and was vicious to dozens of theologians, brilliant minds, got their books off the shelves, wouldn't allow people to read them, and then hounded them out of the church. I don't know who will follow him. In a sense, I don't really care, because the conversation about love and compassion is going on now at a wider level.
That's where spiritualism comes in again.
I think so.
Okay. So back to your novels, you've written 4 to date.
Right.
Priest.
Yeah.
Bird in the Snow.
Yeah.
The
Trouble with Sarah Gullion. Yeah.
Sarah, and of course, Staring at
This one's Staring at Lakes, yeah.
Yeah, Bird in the Snow, is that your mother?
It is, of course.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything I write, my fiction or my memoir, are created stories. I make up the story, and I write in the Irish Times every Tuesday a column of memoir. Right, yeah. And it's a fiction, but it's absolutely true. If I wrote next week that I met a beautiful woman in Cavan who interviewed me for the radio, it would be true. Right. So, Bird in the Snow is a novel I wrote about an old woman on her last days in her own house, when she's trying to resist going into the nursing home, and she wants to stay independent. And I felt, I'd love to write a book about an old woman as a beautiful woman, as a woman who remembers when she was young. And when she had lovely frocks, and she made lovely meringues, and she danced around, and she was really sexy and beautiful.
In the book,
yeah.
actually,
And yet only what people see in the surface, like I work with old people a lot. I still do. At the moment, I'm working in Kinnegad, and I've been recording stories over 3 years that I hope then to make into a one-man show. I love to sit with old people because in those, you know, sometimes very beautiful faces, and more beautiful because they have aged and suffered in life, they have so many stories and so many memories of when they were young and sexy and beautiful and no contraceptives, you know, but they were still having a good time. And I love when, like last night, I remember one woman came up and we were talking about, I think her name is Teresa Kitson. She'd be a great Cavan woman. She's still there in the world, and this person wanted me to sign it for her. And I was able to say, you know, my mother often told me stories about that woman's father.
Your mother had a great involvement with the older people and positive age.
Well, she was one of them.
She was one of them.
She was one of them. My mother used to.
She was a good advertisement.
We took our mother into a nursing home one time at 90 years of age, and the average age of the people in the room was about between 75 and 80. And we said to her, "Would you like to stay here?" She says, "No, it's full of old people." I said, "Mother, you're 90.
Yeah, I remember her going around the town in her Ford Escort Mark II, the purple car.
Yeah, you'd be afraid of her. You'd be afraid of her. Because I tell you, if she ran you down, you were in trouble.
She was some character.
She'd tell you, you dinged me, the front of my car.
Yeah.
She was formidable, but she was a kind of a, I think she became eventually a kind of an icon of Cavan.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. Nellie Harding. The name
Nellie
Harding.
coming.
Yeah, Nellie Harding. Can I ask you a question as a writer, Michael? You know, you write your stories and they're from memories and from your heart and something you're passionate about. And that's good because it makes a good story. But then, you know, other writers, and they've got like wonderful imaginations. You know, you just use your own heart when you're writing. You don't do this, you know, imaginary.
I don't think that there's a difference between your heart and your
Do you think
imagination.
you imagine what your past was?
I think your
It's
imagination
your
and your heart are the one
story,
thing, right?
Yeah, okay.
That, like, our past, everybody kind of invents the past.
Yeah.
And if your heart is bitter, you will kind of
Dwell on
sometimes very negative things. But if you try and keep your heart open in the present moment, you know, in the present moment, if you're finding joy, and you tell yourself in the morning that you're not going out looking for trouble. Don't look for trouble. Look for good. Look for joy, right? And you'll find it.
Yeah. That's
If
called
you
the law
walk-
of attraction.
Is it?
Yeah.
If you walk down the street with a certain disposition of finding the seeking the joy, it'll be there for you on the street. Now, in that situation, you'll probably invent out of your past the 5% that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's what you choose to remember. And that's what I tend to do. I have written dark books like, you know, Priest in the Trouble of Sarah Gulliam. But I don't think there's a difference between imagination and the heart. You know.
I like to hear that too because to focus on good things, you know, it does return to you, and
It does.
it does return
It
to
does,
you.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've written 19 plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a play every year. I've done that as a
Fantastic,
discipline.
yeah.
And I did about 6 of them at the Abbey Theatre. And that was great and wonderful. But I knew I'd come to the end of the road on that. That there's you know, you can't keep repeating yourself. And I'd done 6. And then I thought I need to do something experimental. So I went out and did kind of, you know, wrote one-man shows based on research, like with Travellers or something like that. And then more recently, I've got involved in doing films. So I was at a premiere in the Dublin the Dublin Film Festival there, Black Ice. Had a part in that. And
Is that the one where you're walking along the beach?
No. But I've done 3 or 4 films now. I like to communicate, you know. Yeah.
But that is an art form, and that is the art that you like.
Sure, if I could get a job on Cavan TV, I'd be flying. I would.
You might get one after this.
Yeah.
Your play The Misogynist caused
That caused a story.
it caused a story in its time, yeah.
And I think
It was like, you know, it was like,
well,
not before its time, but just its time.
it was taken off the stage because men, reviewers and radio people at the time were saying, oh, this is a load of gobbler. We don't know what's going on here. It shouldn't be put on the stage. It was very clear what was going on. There was one character on the stage who was a cleric, and he was speaking about a woman with contempt and with misogyny. And it was called Misogynist. And I think if you put it on now, people would get very clearly what it's about.
Yeah. So going back to your books again, you've written your book, and hopefully you'll keep writing. Do you think you've more? Is it a memoir, your book?
Yeah, my
It
book.
is.
This
So
one.
that's not the end of the line.
No, Staring at Lakes is a memoir, and it just covers kind of one thing. It's the story of, I think, how love comes back to you even when you've lost it. And I was talking to a guy a couple of hours ago on the street in Cavan, and he said that when a certain time in his life he thought he could do better when he looked at the wife,
Oh, dear.
right? It'll tell you. And he went through a kind of a negative period in his life, and then about 10 years later, and he was with her all the time, they weren't married, and about 10 years later they went on a holiday to Bundoran, and she was walking on the beach and he was looking at her in the distance, and he realised, he said to me, he said, there was a time in my life I thought she was too old for me, and now I realise she's far too young, because I've aged quicker. He turned into an old man,
Yeah.
and he saw this beautiful young woman who was his wife.
So love does return.
Oh, I think love
Yeah.
love is all over the place. You know, it really
Love
is.
is a different-
And I think that sometimes we don't see it. It's in the ordinary, and we get bored. And sometimes it's good to acknowledge that. Now, Staring at Lakes is a memoir, but I think it's also like any of my books are recording my life. And I hope I go on doing that if I continue,
Yeah.
you know, living.
Yeah, well, sharing that is good, and I like that because, as you say, like people do get fed up, they get anxious,
Yeah,
and they want to move on.
yeah.
And nearly, I would equate that with a lot of relationship breakups and people not
Yeah,
trying too
well,
much. Easy
yeah,
get out
yeah.
clause.
Again, like there's no way I'm suggesting that we shouldn't have divorce. I think if a relationship is not working, people should be better to break up and start again. But there is a phenomenon, I think, where boys, men, foolishly throw away the treasure of their life
Yeah.
and regret it.
I'm
I
glad
do
you
think
said
that.
foolishly.
I do think that happens with men,
Yeah.
because of the kind of our wandering spirit that they have, and they want to be players. There was a young cool woman the other night. We were talking about a guy, and she said, "Oh, he's a player," and she meant what we'd say is a philanderer. You know what I mean? He'd be always wandering somewhere. I think that there's sometimes what happens is that when you have children, a couple have a firstborn child, and it's absolutely a joy, and it's amazing, and then maybe more, and they go through every little thing up to school, and your whole life revolves around this, and you become a different sort of creature. You're no longer a lover.
Yeah.
You can't even have good sex because the child is 9 and in the next room, that kind of stuff. So you become a parent, and all the time you're minding that child, and they're in secondary school, and then finally they do the leaving cert, and they go off to college or they get a job or whatever. And at that stage, you get two people who have lost the romance in their life, and they've become parents with no child. And the danger is they will then either get bored with each other or bore each other to death by just looking at each other over the table like our donkeys. And that's the stage in life, I think, that people have to reinvigorate their marriage and rediscover the romance and rediscover that this is the young woman that you pursued like hell when you were a young man. So that's...
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That hopefully is the way that it does work out for most people who stay in their relationships.
Yeah.
You have a daughter.
Yeah.
And what age is she now?
She's 19.
19.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She's showing any artistic tendencies?
She's doing photography.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's in Dundee.
Okay. And your wife is a sculptress.
Yeah, my wife, Catherine Carmen, is her name, and she's I think one of the foremost Irish figurative sculptors. She does figures in bronze and stone and all that, and has been doing it all her life. She's a member of Aistáin, and she's a really great sculptor. And it's great being married to an artist because we understand each other as artists, and I think we give each other freedoms. Do you know what I mean? She knows I have to be an individual, and she's an individual. And again, that's the thing that can destroy a marriage, where people become too dependent on each other, and they don't want to give freedom to the other person anymore. They say, "Where are you going?"
Yeah.
You know,
That doesn't work
you must
anymore.
be able to have complete freedom as a human being and as an artist. So being married to an artist has been for me great.
Artists have got, different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And that's good in a way when you've two people, artistic people together, isn't
Yeah.
it? I think.
Yeah, I think that artists really, I don't see them as any more special than anybody else. Art or writing is, to me, it's craft. It's
You
simply,
mean craft?
yeah, I do. I think it's all to do with craft. I see myself as a tradesman. And, I had the plasterer plastering this new building that I put up last year up in Leitrim. And I stood inside that and I said to him, Vincent, if I could write as well as you could plaster, I'd be good. Because that's a craft. And by working at his craft, he makes it beautiful.
I would have thought like writing comes from the heart and the craft comes from your hands, but I won't argue with you.
Okay.
Okay. So see, that is our news program this week. We'll touch on some international news of the week.
Okay.
Okay, what do you think? So what do you think about the Blade Runner and that bizarre case of did he or did he not shoot his girlfriend in the bathroom?
Well, I think there's two things about that. One is the tragedy that's going on, and secondly is the media obsession with it, right? It's a classic example of where you get a tragedy that's lived out in public, and then that's one thing. But the separate thing is how the media can feed on that. And there's an endless amount of possibilities that you can discuss about that man and his sport and the legs he doesn't have and the gun in the bed and her in the bath and did she take a leak or didn't she? And it becomes prurient, and that in some sense it does sell newspapers.
Yeah.
Because people are fascinated. So I think that's what's phenomenal about it is actually the way that people are interested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's got a lot to do with people are just reality mad these days. But you're in the media. You write a column in the media. You're a journalist
Yeah.
as well. You do journalism.
Yeah.
How do you feel that the media does throw out these things and direct people in this line of thinking?
I think the media objectifies a tragedy like that. And they do the same they do the same with the Pope,
But it
or
encourages
they do the
that.
same with the Queen, or with Kate Middleton. There was a row last week where somebody was writing about her. There's public rituals, like the Pope is public pageantry, and the Queen in England is public pageantry, and a violent death with a famous celebrity becomes a public pageant. It's probably necessary in some way that the society feeds on these things. We live out subconsciously. We are living out our own anxieties, our own ideas.
And the media's feeding that.
People who have a view about the dangers in men will say, "Oh, that fella's guilty." They're unconsciously attaching to him their own perceptions of how men might be dangerous, or there's always a temper, because unconsciously they may be aware of people who have tempers.
Okay.
And then some other people will say, he mightn't be that guilty, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, objective.
And when the Queen came to Ireland, there was a whole lot of unconscious healing going on with people. That through her bowing in the Garden of Remembrance, or by shaking, what's his name, McGuinness's hand, that in these public moments, you photograph them, unconsciously there are people sitting in small little villages up and down Fermanagh and Tyrone who are healed, who feel it's okay because we have seen it now.
Okay. Sometimes though, the media can get it terribly wrong about people, judging people and throwing out totally the wrong image, and you're guilty before proven.
Yeah.
Does the media never really says it's sorry per se? Does it? It never really.
I don't think the media needs to say sorry.
You don't think so?
No, because I really think even though they make mistakes, and they made terrible mistakes, the priest Father Reynolds over in the west of Ireland was desperately abused by RTE.
That's right.
There about 6 months or a year ago. So they really get it wrong. But I live in a society where you can speak your mind, where you can disagree with stuff, where you can be open, right?
That's fine. That's.
People live in societies all over the world where they don't vote, they can't speak, there's laws against women, you can't play music. If a media is the price we have to pay for freedom of
It's a better
expression,
option.
then let's have loads of tabloids. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the media again it can though throw out what it wants people to think about a story.
Well,
It can.
you can put a spin on it. Yeah.
It puts a
You can
spin
put
on
a spin on it, but.
Yeah.
In the end, I think nowadays that could be done when you had one guy controlling the media, like one big mogul, and he owned 5 papers, and you could throw out, you could demonise a particular prime minister in Britain, or you could defend a particular prime minister. Now, in the age of the internet and Facebook and Vimeo and YouTube, there's an enormous democratisation of viewpoint, so that we can express ourselves now. Like even the fact that, I'm having the joy this evening to be with you on this news programme from Cavan, on Cavan television. That's a sign that, the ability to speak out has become a democratic right. And that stops any one monopoly of power, controlling the views in the media.
Okay, you know media and you're there in the media. Would it have an influence on you, anything you read or anything you believe in the media, or do you would it have an influence on you yourself?
No, I use it for information.
Okay.
And I think that's when most people begin to.
I do agree
They
with
use
you,
it for information. Tweets. You get tweets, and somebody tweets something from the New York Times, and you press a button and you're reading the New York Times, and then somebody else tweets something from the Anglo-Cent, and you're reading the Anglo-Cent, the next article. Like that concept of actually being able to read in 10 minutes over a cup of tea in a restaurant, you could read a bit of the New York Times, a bit of the Anglo-Cent, and then something from a book publisher. That's extraordinary. Like 10, 15 years ago, we couldn't have imagined that would happen. That'd be like science fiction. And that this little computer would be on your phone.
Yeah, so do you think that global media is a very positive thing?
I think it's wonderful.
Positive.
I think it's
Good.
wonderful, yeah. I think it's...
You don't see the danger or the harm in it, like with cyberbullying, and invasion of people's lives. And we have a little instance of a story of the Cavan nanny that's in New York.
Yes.
And that girl is just promoted into, worldwide media. And she's not even charged.
Yeah, but do you know what
do you not think that's a downside?
No, I don't.
You don't.
I don't, because I think what's more worrying about that case, about that nanny, is not that she's in the media, but that she's not in the media. Because I saw a thing on the Anglo-Cent website today about her. Now, I hadn't heard anything about her for a year. And I said to myself, Jesus, she's still in prison, and it hasn't even come to trial yet.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not the media, it's the lack of media. There's loads of cases like hers where somebody is in prison and they're on remand, so they're not being charged. And the media can get out their story.
Yeah, so you like to use the media to
use,
get
of course.
and
If somebody felt that there's something can be done that woman is being held unfairly, then the media could be used to get your point across and to campaign for her and that sort of stuff. I think that's wonderful. We lived in Ireland when there was the censorship of Sinn Féin on the national.
Right.
And I lived in Fermanagh, and I knew what was going on, and people down in Dublin hadn't a clue what was going on. Hadn't a clue because there was censorship. Again, that was a period before internet. Yeah.
One last thing, Michael, we mentioned before we finish. This week, actually tomorrow, the 23rd of February, is the 70th anniversary of the burning of St Clair's orphanage.
Yeah.
Again, that's another thing that needs to be redressed. Not redressed, but what really happened?
Yeah.
Will we ever know? Will we ever?
I think people do know. I think there's been books written about the poor Clares in Cavan and the fire and the orphans who died in it, and I think that there have been books written that explain it all. And we'll never hear from the nuns now in Cavan because they're all gone and they're all dead and whatever. But what I can't understand still, and I don't mean it vindictively, but the clergy and the church, they still are missing something because they've sidelined themselves from conversation. And it seems that they can't get round their heads that apology is a healthy, human and dignified thing to do. That if I say, I did a thing actually recently I spoke publicly in Dublin, I think, of Trailblazers, and it's on Vimeo, you can get it on Vimeo, where I spoke about being a man and listening to the Savita Halappanavar case where she died because they wouldn't do an abortion. I felt as a man, I felt ashamed. I felt deeply ashamed that I lived in a country which still is not treating women as proper citizens of the Republic. And so, I'm just coming to the thing with the Magdalene sisters and to the proclares. There's nobody, they feel that they have to be defensive, that they can't come out and say, no matter how bad we feel, we're old people now, we're in old homes, and we did our best, and we did go in thinking it was the right thing to do. But leaving that aside, get over yourself. It still was a terrible mistake and a terrible injustice. And to come out and say, we are deeply sorry. You know, for Sean Brady to express much more sorrow than defensiveness.
Yeah.
You know, when
what is that? What is it power thing?
Sean Brady, the Cardinal,
I know Sean Brady.
he worked through the courts for years trying to keep down the things that were coming. And the things that were coming were only people saying, listen, I'm hurt. Yeah. You hurt me. Please tell me you're sorry.
All he wanted was people to say,
if the church did that, if the church just said, listen, I'm really so sorry, we did it wrong, it was a mistake, you know, but we did it with good intention, like we did believe in Jesus, we wanted to do stuff, but we made a mess and I'm sorry. I've said that to my wife so many times when I've gone to cook, I was really only trying. Yeah. And now I made shit of it, but I'm sorry. Yeah. And it helps be human to be sorry, because you're inviting somebody to do the most wonderful thing in the world, and that is to forgive. And when Enda Kenny did it in the Dáil, and when you could see that he heartfeltly meant it, it invited this beautiful moment of generosity from victims to start to forgive, and thereby is healing. And without the sorry, they can't forgive. And that's why, and people, you know, in power don't seem to understand that. In order for those people to move on, to feel that they forgive you, Monsignor, you must say sorry.
Yeah. And yet that's one of the things that the church teaches us, is that when you say I'm sorry for my sins, you're forgiven.
I know, the irony is they have this as a core teaching, which is a beautiful and powerful teaching. A teaching that has made, you know, civilization in Europe all the better. The idea of forgiveness. And to be part of that is to say sorry. And sorry is not saying, you know, I just, it still amazes me. It still amazes me that in the past 20 years, even 20 years ago, I think the organised Roman Church, the clergy, could have still pulled everything out of the fire and moved on and become a bigger church. And they still wouldn't. They still refuse, and now it's just they're out of the conversation to a great degree, you know.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for sharing that with us. It was fantastic of you to come along this evening. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I really enjoyed listening to your reading last night.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. A real pleasure.
Thank you.
And that was Michael Harding, novelist and columnist, who was with us earlier in the studio today. In the studio with me now is Sergeant Noel Harraghy, Crime Prevention Officer with the Cavan Monaghan Garda Division. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Again, I suppose I want to thank you for inviting me on the programme, and again to wish you luck. I think this is the first evening this programme is going out, so again wish you the best of luck with it.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the public, how the public can be more vigilant and can protect themselves better against all types of crime.
Yeah, I suppose the main thing is, again, people see an awful lot of things when they're out there. You know, out and about, whether we're going for a walk or whatever, and people, you know, people spot something suspicious or something that's not normally going on in a particular place, and they got this intuition that tells them, you know, things isn't right. And again, I suppose the message we're trying to give across is that trust your intuition. That if something, you know, if you think something is out of place, do something about it. And I suppose what can you do? First of all, is try and get as much information as you can there, like whether you're writing down the phone number of a car or getting a description of somebody after there's a few people around a particular house. But you get that information and you ring the guards straight away with
Okay,
it.
so contact the Gardaí. The Gardaí take this on board. You're not wasting their time.
You're definitely not wasting time, because that's what we're encouraging. Because again, we would find, when you go out and investigate different crimes and doing investigations, you when you go do the house inquiries type of thing,
Yeah.
you realise people do see an awful lot of things, and they just, well, they don't think it's important or whatever, or for one reason or another they don't report it. But the sooner we get that information, at least there's a chance that we may be able to do something with it. Or the other thing, I suppose, again as well, is if you do spot something and you ring the guards, and I suppose they are criminals that are in a particular area, and if they do spot a patrol car in the area, they're going to disappear. They're not going to hang
Okay.
about anyway. So you are saving the general community from further attack or whatever.
And maybe that one piece of information you do pass to the Gardaí is actually a vital clue and could link the whole thing together.
Exactly. But the other thing is, again, I suppose the way, unless you catch somebody in the act at the moment, it's hard enough. It's hard enough to follow it on, like to be successful with an investigation as such. But the more information we have, but again, the important thing is getting the information on time, getting it as soon as possible.
Okay, so somebody calls to your door and you're not quite sure who it is,
Yeah.
and you're vulnerable, you're there on your own.
Yeah. The important thing is there, again, it's your house. Your responsibility, you control who comes into your house and who doesn't come into your house. If you're in the house on your own, I'd say the first thing you do is, again, the access to your house is very, very important. So again, you keep the front door locked, you keep the back door locked. If somebody wants to come, let them ring the doorbell, let them bang the knocker or knock on the door, whatever they have to do to draw your attention. You go to the door, you check out to see who's there before you open the door. Again, it's important that you have to be satisfied as to who's on the other side of that particular door.
So it's important that people do check and identify themselves with who it is. Sorry, another point I want to make there is, these people who come with cards and say, I'm from the HSE or I'm an inspector of this, that and the other, they're actually quite convincing and saying, I'm here on business.
Yeah.
Can you really check a card, or can you really be sure?
I wouldn't trust any ID card,
Okay.
because again, unless you're familiar with what an ID card looks like, you're not going to know what a genuine looks like.
Everybody will HSE, different people will have different kind of
or
cards.
even the guard ID card. I says, I have my ID card. If I show it to you, do you know if that's genuine or is it not? Because again, it's very easy to go on a computer and make up the card. If I description,
Yes.
it looks like the real thing. So again, a lot of time with somebody from HSE would be calling, they're probably repeat callers as such, and you may build up a relationship with them and you know who's calling. But again, you have to be 110% sure who they are before you let them in past your door.
And another point I'd like to make there is, even if they are genuine and they are who they are, say they are, you actually still don't have to, you're not bound to let anybody into your house that you don't want in your house.
Exactly. And you have control. And again, it's very, very important that, that if they are genuine, they don't mind calling again.
And of course, if they are genuine, they won't mind you making that phone call to check it out.
Exactly.
So you'd be pretty safe that way.
And the other thing is just be aware of it. If somebody does show you an ID card and they say, right, there's my number there, ring that number, don't be conned by that either, because again, that could be sort of a made-up number on the bottom of the card.
It could be a kind of scam.
Exactly, a complete scam.
Okay.
And again, what you have to do is you control the access to your door. If they're wrong and they're in, it's very hard to put them out. If they're wrong and they're still outside, well, at least they're still outside.
Okay. We mentioned the word scams.
Yeah.
And there are loads of scams going on down there. And I'd like to make the point that about crime as well, that it's not only older people who are vulnerable against perpetrators. It's everybody is vulnerable against perpetrators. Young, old, middle-aged. And you mentioned earlier there when we were talking that you were saying, is it the middle class or the working class people are being particularly targeted?
Well, as far as
scams,
but even the scams or even the house breakings as such, it would probably, if one was to go with the number of house breakings and look at the profile of the injured parties, it's normally people, working class people, who are away and their houses are empty during the day, and whether they're away then leaving kids to school or whatever, or away shopping, whatever.
So people with a particular what would you say, schedule, regular coming and going.
Exactly, and people sort of, you have regular habits, and people get to know these habits. Getting back to the scams, then I suppose again, all classes of societies will suffer from scams, like the well educated as well as the people that might be that well educated, the very rich and the very poor. We all get caught at some particular stage. No matter how smart we think we are, some it'll be tried on us. If we can cop it on, sometimes we don't.
Just to mention some of the scams there, of course everybody's aware about the Spanish lottery. You don't go near that.
Exactly. You have the Spanish lottery, you have the Portuguese lottery, and you have the Italian lottery.
You don't go near lotteries.
You don't go near them.
You don't go near lotteries.
But again, the reason them letters keep coming is because people do respond to them. So
I can't believe, and you did say that, I can't believe that people actually do get conned by these scams.
They do get conned, and I suppose if you read down through the letter, whatever it was, they're very convincing the way they're worded, that you need this and you need that and need whatever else, to get to them. But again, the only place for them letters is actually the fire or the shredder or whatever.
Okay, so everybody should know, if you haven't been in Spain or Portugal and played the lottery, you're hardly likely to play the lottery.
But if you're not likely to play it, but if you never bought it, nobody's going to buy you a ticket. And if you didn't buy a ticket yourself, there's not a hope of winning. So you're not going to win.
Well, we all know about this.
That's one of the scams. The other scam, I suppose, again, and you would have heard a fair bit about it, is the somebody ringing you up at home telling you your computer's running slow.
Tell us about that.
They'll claim some of them claim they're from Microsoft, other ones will claim they're from some computer company that can sell you some sort of software for spam software or whatever. Again,
so bottom line, what are they looking for there?
They're looking for you to give your credit card. They're getting access to your computer, but they're also charging you a fee, and the fee is that you'll pay it with your credit card.
Yeah, so you don't do that.
You don't do it.
You don't do it.
And Microsoft or no other computer company is going to ring you looking for that information online or on the phone. The other one, I suppose, that's going lately is that you could be after visit on the internet or whatever, and you get this message up on your screen, a Garda message claiming you're after visiting an illicit site or whatever, and you have to pay money to get your screen cleared.
So let's be clear about that. That does not happen.
That does. It's a complete scam.
But it's a complete scam. The Gardaí do not do that anyway at all.
No way.
Okay.
And it has happened. Different police forces around the world has hit the guards at this stage, and the Garda crest will come up, and they're looking for money to get,
So if you see that, it is not legal in any way.
No way.
You did mention some scams there. You actually mentioned one there earlier, the missed call scam. Now, I hadn't heard of that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one that's only happened maybe in the last few weeks. Again, the phone might ring for 2 or 3 seconds, and it stops. And then you notice maybe a missed call.
Yeah, curiosity gets you better.
Exactly. So again, our temptation is to ring back to see who was ringing us in the first place. Again, oftentimes that number that you're ringing back, it's a foreign number, it's a premium number. It could cost you maybe €10 a minute, maybe on for a premium line.
So that's how they make the money. That's how they make the money. To a premium number.
Exactly. So the advice there is, again,
drains your money
if you get a call and miss it, if it's important, the person will ring you again.
Okay.
Don't go ringing back. If you see a missed call on your phone and it looks a foreign number or whatever, don't ring it back.
Do they look foreign numbers? It's not like our 086 or 087. It is a funny number.
There'll be a few extra digits on it. Yeah. The 087 preset ones were targeted there last week or the week before. It seemed just more or less all 087 numbers that were actually ringing, but that could change. That could go 086 or 085 or whatever.
They can ring in that. Yeah. So common sense prevails.
Well, again, it's
exactly. A really strange number.
If it comes up, any strange number, any number that comes up at the moment for the time being anyway, if you miss a call, if it's important, they're going to ring you back. Okay, don't you go ringing back the number.
Now, things people can do to increase their own peace of mind and security, apart from the Gardaí, there are community-based things out there like the Text Watch.
There are several groups, you have the neighbourhood watch schemes are out there, the community alert schemes, you've the morning call ones there as well. Again, in Cavan, a lot of community alert schemes are very, very good. And the community alert scheme, I suppose, it's alert communities, and that's what you're talking about as such. But again, a lot of them have gone down the route there recently of setting up text schemes.
Yeah, that's the new one I heard about.
Exactly, and but basically it involves, again, if somebody spots something wrong, there's a coordinator within the community who would have a phone, and the phone would belong to the mobile phone would belong to the community. But if somebody spots something wrong, they ring the guards with it, and the guards will check it out. And if it needs to be sent out as a text, the guards will ring the person who owns that particular phone. That person will generate a text and send it out among the community. So at least the information gets out among the community if there's something going wrong.
Okay, you would encourage people to get involved in these schemes.
Definitely,
of course.
You get, apart from crime, people get to know each other. People get to know who's living where, and again, it's a matter of keeping an eye out for each other. And if there's people vulnerable in a particular area, you're getting to know about them as well.
And people are feeling pretty vulnerable at the moment because you've all this stuff going on in the media that the Garda stations are closing down, not as many Gardaí on foot, and
that's
how that is having an effect on police.
It is having
how are you going to let the people know it's okay, you're still safe in your homes at night time? You
are still safe in your homes. Again, there are certain patrols out all the time, but again, I suppose the fact again with any community alert schemes as such, there's a guard, a liaison guard with each of the schemes.
Okay.
Again, so that bit of contact will always be there with the communities, regardless of whether the guard is based locally or otherwise. So again, there'll always be that sort of contact with a particular guard, that the community will recognise that person, and then that guard will also have an input to the community. Again, with them community alert schemes is out there, I would visit a lot of them at different stages and give, maybe address the meetings. And again, I must say in Cavan for the last 12 months, meetings are extremely well attended.
Okay, so the way Ireland was like, everybody knew everybody at one stage. Now we have a lot of foreign nationals working in the country, and the Garda used to live in the village years ago now, and it's not like that anymore. It's more broad. Does that have any, does that make policing a little harder?
Well, it's a completely different style of policing to when I would have started initially, because again, what you said, like we would have known everybody, and you walk down the street
and everybody knew their guard.
Exactly, everybody knew you. Again, I suppose when new people come to an area, it takes that little bit of time to build up that bit of trust and repertoire and get to know each other. And again, it leaves things a little bit more difficult, surely. And again, it's to get them people integrated into our community as well. And sometimes it can be. Sometimes it works, and we have to trust them, and they have to trust us, and that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of quite amount of time to do that. But it's important that we make the effort. If there are, if we have people from other countries living in our community, it's important that we try to bring them all in together as such, because again, if otherwise it'll end up, you'll have a ghetto, you'll have a gang living there, and there'll be them and us. So again, it's important that we all have qualities, and we all have new ideas, and again, if you put them all together, it's the only way to go forward.
Okay, I'd like to get back to some of the things that we should be watching out for. People robbing heating oil tanks. I mean, obviously, if you see somebody driving up with a tractor, with these big
tubes,
with the big 5 litre drums, and in the back of a car and stuff, they're up to no good, obviously.
Again, a lot of the oil stolen maybe at night time or whatever as such. And again, we would find a lot of the places that have been targeted recently are like schools, churches, community centres. Places where you wouldn't have somebody around all the time as such. Or maybe again somebody going on holidays and somebody knows that the house is vacant for a while. How do you prevent it? Again, it's just being alert.
Is there any kind of a lock or something that you can put on the top of your tank?
It's very hard, really, because again, the outlet for the oil is on the bottom of the tank as such. So again,
that's not foolproof.
It's not. But funny, there are different companies there are a company at the moment that you can get a sort of a precast concrete shape of thing that goes around the tank, or else different people have made sort of steel housings and putting the tank in it. But I believe the only way to secure a tank is to put something, whether it be a steel container around it, or whether to build a wall up and roof it. The only thing is, I would urge anybody, like if anybody was tempted to put an oil tank into a garage, just double check with the fire officer and double check with your insurance to make sure that you're covered by insurance.
Okay, Sergeant Henry, we've just got about a minute left. Finally, just to assure people out there, any last point you'd like to make? You were saying earlier lock your doors, lock them when you're in the house, certainly when you go out of the house.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
be a little bit more vigilant
Be a
yourself.
little bit more vigilant. Be aware of who's calling. Be aware that everybody 99% of the people who will knock on your door are going to be genuine people, and that's important to remember that as well. And it's a small number of people that are there to do any harm, and it's just you have to be ready for them, and just be alert and be aware, and just take them precautions, and be on the ball.
Okay. So now on the screen you will see Sergeant Hanrahy's a number for the Gardaí that you can contact with any of the issues we spoke about here this evening. If you want to speak to the crime prevention officer, that is your number. It's up on the screen.
That's right.
Okay. So if you have an issue or a question you'd like to ask, you can contact that number. Once again, I'd like to thank you very much, Sergeant Hanrahy, for coming into the studio and providing us with that information and assuring people that they are safe. Just be more vigilant, really, isn't it?
That's correct. And again, thanks very much for having us here. And again, just to warn the people, let the people know it. I don't want anybody going to bed scared. It's not a bad society we're living in.
That's good. Okay, so that's bringing us to the end of the programme this week. I'd like to thank my guests, Michael Harding and Sergeant Harrahy for coming into the studio. Hopefully we will be back next week with more local news and views, and we're going to do a feature on each town in the county, one at a time, of course, in the coming weeks. Should be sure to tune in and join me next week. Good evening from Cavan TV News and Views.